Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're looking at a really significant event, the 2020 U.S. strike that killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani.
Yes, it's a fascinating case study. We've looked at a lot of material on this.
And the big question that keeps coming up is, was this strike, which tactically worked, obviously, did it actually hit its strategic marks, its political goals?
Especially now, right?
Yeah.
With everything going on in the region and Iran's nuclear program much further along. The sources we reviewed really cast doubt on whether it achieved what it set out to do.
So let's dig into that. What do the sources say happened immediately after the strike? Did it deter Iran?
Well, that's the thing. Tactically, Soleimani was gone. But strategically, it looks like it did the opposite of deterring them. It seemed to, galvanize Iran.
Galvanize how?
Almost immediately, Tehran fired ballistic missiles, hit U.S. troops stationed in Iraq. Over 100 were wounded, so not exactly deterrence.
Right. And was that it, or did the repercussions spread?
Oh, it spread. The missile strike was just the start.
Yeah.
Our sources point to a real uptick, a noticeable increase in proxy attacks after that.
Attacks where?
Across the board, really.
Yeah.
Targeting Saudi oil facilities, you had attacks near U.S. embassies,
Yeah.
issues in shipping lanes. It wasn't de-escalation. It felt more like pouring fuel on the fire.
Mm-hmm. So, far from being deterred, Iran retaliated directly and then ramped up proxy actions. Okay. What about Iran's overall standing? Did the strike weaken the regime or its nuclear ambitions?
That's another area where the outcome seems counterintuitive based on the sources. Didn't really weaken them. Arguably, it strengthened their hand in some ways.
How so?
Well, look at the nuclear program. Iran pretty quickly started enriching uranium to higher levels, and they also limited access for IAEA inspectors, the international watchdog.
Right.
And if you compare that situation to where things stood under the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, back then, Iran's stockpile was tiny, like 97% smaller, according to the reports we read. So this maximum pressure campaign, culminating in the strike, seems to have produced, minimum results on the nuclear front. It actually accelerated their program. Plus, politically, the hardline President Raisi later used Soleimani's death, his martyrdom, to consolidate power.
Interesting. So, it strengthened the hardliners and sped up the nuclear clock. What about the U.S. side of the equation, domestically and internationally?
Domestically, it was complicated. It kind of flew in the face of the promise to end endless wars, didn't it? Because U.S. troop numbers in the region actually went up afterwards.
Yeah, that's a contradiction.
Even some Republicans like Rand Paul were critical, calling it a sledgehammer approach. And internationally, the lack of diplomatic prep was pretty stark.
Meaning?
Well, sources indicate there wasn't really consultation with NATO allies. The UN wasn't brought in. And then you had Iraq's parliament voting just days later to kick U.S. forces out. That's oscillating.
So creating friction with allies and partners right when you might need them. Was there a plan for what came next? An exit strategy or a de-escalation plan?
That seems to be a major gap identified in our sources. It looks like a crisis was triggered without a clear path to wind it down.
So Iran retaliates with missiles? Then what?
Then the U.S. response was mainly more sanctions, which, after a major military strike and missile retaliation, felt kind of toothless. Some reports suggest it confused allies and maybe even emboldened adversaries. It lacked that coherent follow-through.
Okay, so a tactical success, but a string of strategic issues. How did this play out with the American public? And what's the longer-term view from the sources we looked at?
Public perception was definitely shaky. Polls at the time showed a lot of Americans were worried it would lead to a bigger war. Accusations of recklessness were flying around, and interestingly, some analysis suggests it shifted national security voters by the November 2020 election.
And the fundamental flaw, according to these analyses?
It seems to boil down to maybe treating a complex geopolitical issue like, a real estate deal, just removing one figure without fully accounting for the history, the culture, the deep roots of Iranian statecraft, which goes back millennia. You can't just decapitate that complex system with a single drone strike and expect a simple outcome.
So the idea of a quick fix was maybe the problem itself.
Exactly. The sources suggest the long-term result was squandered leverage and an Iran that feels more empowered, more entrenched, leading to this ongoing cycle of escalation, but maybe with fewer options, fewer tools left in the toolbox for the U.S. Some call it a generational strategic setback.
It really drives home that point, doesn't it? Simple military actions rarely solve deep political problems.
No, they often create new ones, sometimes worse ones. It really makes you think, and maybe this is the final thought for you, our listeners. What lessons should we take from interventions like this? Interventions meant to deter, but which end up maybe just amplifying instability and shifting power in unpredictable ways.